This is a special Film Rage episode only for patron members. As part of your membership, you get special episodes, weekly updates of what Film Rage is seeing for the week, and much, much more. Thanks to all our subscribers. You are helping this independent podcast bring content we hope you love or rage over. We don't care. Now, this week, we have a special guest, Casey from The Nerdy Photographer, who is going to be joining us all the way from New York City. Or
New York City?
No. Exactly. Casey, welcome aboard.
Oh, thank you guys for having me. It's one of my favorite things to do is guest on your podcast because it means I don't have to edit anything.
That's right. You know that on Film Rage, everything is live all the time. Now, tell our listeners a little bit about what The Nerdy Photographer is.
I'm the host of the Nerdy Photographer podcast. We discuss photography, business, art, little science fiction and nerdery of all sorts. So come on over, give it a listen. If nothing else, it's a lot of fun.
It is a lot of fun. I can attest to that for sure. Casey put a challenge out to us because he didn't want to just do one movie special for our patrons. He wants to do 3. So this is the first in our trilogy. Casey, maybe you can tell us what this trilogy means and what it's about.
It is the great collaboration partnership between director John Carpenter and Kurt Russell. I think that they created some really iconic films together in 3 different genres, distinctly, and I think that their collaboration is amazing. I still watch these films on a regular basis, even though they've been out for 30 some years at this point.
And so we are going to be talking about the first of the trilogy, which is Escape from New York. And I'm going to go not first. It's going to be the Mur.
All right. Well, I am one of the few who have not seen this movie. Of all the John Carpenter movies, this is one that I hadn't seen. So Jim and I had a little afternoon tea.
We did.
Watched a little Escape from New York.
And crumpets.
So just the general gist of it, futuristic 1997. The U.S. president's plane crashes into Manhattan, which is now a giant maximum prison. But only one man can save him.
Only one.
That's Snake Plissken.
There he is.
I don't know. Upon seeing this the first time ever, reminded me of a few different movies that I've seen in the past. Namely one of Jim's favorites, The Warriors. Throw a little Mad Max in there. It definitely had its 80s cheese. There were some interesting things about it. Kurt Russell was good. Most everybody else in the movie was basically a cartoon character. Didn't really have a whole lot of depth. Adrienne Barbeau was memorable for various obvious reasons. And just digging up a little bit of tidbits of trivia like I like to do. I just found out, just reading here, I was wondering why the girl, the chock full of nuts, got a higher billing than Harry Dean Stanton and Adrienne Barbeau. Turns out she was actually married to Kurt Russell at the time.
Oh.
And Adrienne Barbeau was married to John Carpenter at the time.
What?
So there you go. And Jamie Lee Curtis actually did the opening female voice of the prison at the start of the movie. So
there you go. Probably
you
Casey
go.
knows this already.
He probably knows this, being one of his favorite movies.
But our listeners might not.
Yeah, I don't know. It was all right. It was a fun little ride. A little cheesy at moments. I'd say it was definitely a meh for me.
All right. Well, I will go next because, as we already know, usually Bryce is not really that organized. So, Kurt Russell drops into New York for a good time, not a long time.
Not a long time.
Only 22 hours to get the president, Donald Pleasance, when Air Force One was taken down in a post-apocalyptic world where New York is a prison. I love how in 1988 they turned New York into a prison, especially because from my understanding, and this is where Casey will add extra value, that's what New York was going to probably be after the 1970s if they hadn't changed it a bit. So I found that part very, very humorous. Plus, they had sweet, and I mean sweet, state-of-the-art computer animation through the entire movie. I want to know though how Kurt Russell goes from the computer who wears tennis shoes to the badass motherfucker of Snake Plissken. But I'm sure glad he left Disney to become so. That's what I'm going to say. I remember the first time I saw this, it was one of those experiences. I think maybe Casey will go into this a little bit more deeper. I think it's kind of the beginning of that whole dystopian film features that happened in the 80s. I think maybe Mad Max was maybe the first, or the first at least that I remember. And then, of course, if my memory serves me correctly, and Murray will usually fact check me, that I think not Mad Max, but Road Warrior came out the same year as this one.
It's possible.
Possible. Yeah, so this film is a little bit dated and probably doesn't hold up as well as I think some other movies maybe, and possibly that is because of, when you're using technology and pretending it's a different age, it doesn't always go so well. But what it does have is we have a drag show, we have Ernest Borgnine, we have Harry Dean Stanton, we have Adrienne Barbeau and her awesomeness breastises, we got a chandelier Cadillac, and the greatest walking tour of New York since the Warriors. And like most movies that involve the government, never trust the government. That's a secret in case you didn't know. This is one of those ones that I had such fond memories of in the past, but I hadn't rewatched it probably since maybe the 90s. I'm not sure. So I did find on rewatch again that it had a bit of some pacing issues in my opinion. With this type of film and the fairly tight runtime of an hour and 39 minutes, it does get a bit draggy, and I think Carpenter might have wanted to put his pedal on the metal for the entire film, because there was a little bit of dragginess. Donald Pleasance in the end with the machine gun is definitely worth the price of admission, because that scene alone was like icing on that candy cake. So I love this from Kurt Russell's badassness, but for me, rewatch on the amount of times, for me, I also have to give it a meh, unfortunately.
All right then.
All right, now is that Bryce now is taking over the rounds? We want to leave Casey with the last word.
Well, yeah, we definitely do, because he's going to have a lot more to say about it than me, because I remember watching this probably, I didn't get to see it in theaters because I would have been 7. But
that's no excuse.
But
Yeah.
I think I watched it for the first time in about 88 or so. I remember at that point absolutely hating this movie. So we fast forward many, many years later, and I still hate this movie. It's got Kurt Russell doing Kurt Russell, and there's just nothing here. I did not enjoy it at all on this second watching, and this is only the second time I've ever watched it, because why would I watch it again? This, in my opinion, is John Carpenter. John Carpenter has made some bad movies. This is the worst.
But didn't he make Escape from L.A.?
Yeah.
Because that's way worse.
At least the up the campiness even higher with Escape from L.A., and I can respect it on that. It was awful too, don't get me wrong, but this did not connect with me at all when I was young, and now that I'm an old man, it still doesn't. I really don't get it. If there's any bright spot at all in it,
it was Adrienne Barbeau and her assets.
No.
That's right.
You know what? Yeah, no, like nobody was even any good in this. Like I was so disappointed in Isaac Hayes. Harry Dean Stanton, that was just phoning it in. I didn't like this movie. I'm sorry.
Okay.
It was a rage.
All right, let's hear the true fan of Escape from New York and see what Casey has to say about this fun film.
Call me Snake. I gotta say that I will agree that this is the weakest of the 3 films that Kurt Russell and John Carpenter do together. But I will say I still love this movie. Even like I see more like it's been a long time since I've watched this movie in full. I regularly would watch it on cable if it came on, just from wherever it picked up. And I think the last time I watched it all the way through was probably like 6 or 7 years ago. But watching it with a more critical eye this time, yes, it is. The effects are dated. But I will one thing I would like to mention is the shot of Snake, the computer grid of New York City, the buildings. That is not a computer graphic. That is done with an actual model. They did like neon tape or paint on the edges of the buildings to make it look like a computer graphic.
Whoa.
When he's like flying into New York City. Also, I have to say, speaking of flying into New York City, seeing a plane, like I forgot that they actually crashed the plane into Manhattan at the very beginning. I thought that the plane kept going and the president ejected out. Like that was just my memory of it. And maybe I blocked that out because of September 11th.
Yeah.
But yeah, just like that whole sequence, I'm like, oh yeah, oh that's how that went, or that the plane had like broken up before, because the thing we start this whole thing with American imperialism is the reason that the president, the Air Force One has been taken over, and Carpenter has there's a lot of social commentary in this film. Snake Plissken is a twice decorated American war hero. America is at war with Russia. We're in a ground war in Asia. Say what you will about that. Made a major mistake there. But he's Leningrad and Siberia, I think, are the 2 places he got Purple Hearts. And this is an ongoing war. But yet this guy who is an American hero has to rob banks. He robbed the National Reserve. So there's a lot of commentary here about how people are treated, both like the prisoners and this guy who how do you treat your vets? Carpenter. This was a theme that Carpenter has through a lot of movies, as far as the social commentary.
Yep.
Which I think that he and George Romero are very good at doing. That being said, yes, there are some dated things here. That the fact that the World Trade Center is still there shows you how dated it is. But Jim is correct. The way that New York City was going in the 70s and early 80s, they were planning to just bulldoze major sections of it and turn it into freeway to go from Long Island to New Jersey. So that was just kind of the thought of how things were going to happen to New York. And I kept thinking as I watched it over again, going, wow, I think they actually shot all of this on location in the city.
Yeah.
Obviously they weren't up on the roof of the buildings, but a lot of this stuff I think was shot on the streets of actually in New York. I think this is a wonderful ensemble cast. Everybody's got their little bits. And I think that I did not realize, I knew that Carpenter was married to Adrienne Barbeau, but I did not realize that Kurt Russell was married to the chock full of nuts woman. I think the reason that she gets they think that they do this twice in this film is they set you up oh, this is going to be the love interest.
Yeah.
He's going to have a love interest, and that's good. Nope, gone. Yeah. And then later on, you think that Adrienne Barbeau is he's going to be come with me. Let's see. She's nope.
Yeah, I got to give kudos to that, actually. That's one thing I hate about those action movies is they'll throw a love interest there for no apparent reason whatsoever. And you're right. They didn't do that with this one.
This movie also changed the trajectory of Kurt Russell's career.
Yeah.
As Jim mentioned before, he was the Disney guy. He was Mr. Family Friendly. And this changed his, the trajectory of what Kurt Russell would have been.
I wonder if it's because he was...
Well, yeah, according to this, he fought hard to get the role. because he wanted to get away from Disney.
Yeah, but didn't he do Elvis before this one?
I don't remember.
I think Elvis was before this.
Yeah.
And so
Well,
if he
it
did
was
Elvis,
obviously
maybe Carpenter saw him in Elvis, and that's what helped him to say, you know what, maybe you can do this.
Maybe.
Yeah, possibly.
So sorry, you're saying this is the reason we got Tango and Cash?
I don't think it's the only reason.
Amazing.
Yeah, I happen to like that movie.
The armored SUV.
That's right.
That's about
Good old Jack Palance.
exactly.
Loved it.
Also,
That was
characters in this
cheesy
movie.
80s at its best.
The characters in this movie. You got Lee Van Cleef, Ernst
Yeah.
Borgnine,
Yeah.
Ray Dean Stanton, like Isaac Hayes, Donald Pleasance. Yeah, a number one. Yeah, the
Number
Duke
one.
of New York. Like it's just brilliant. And like that moment at the end when like Snake says to him, like, "Hey, a lot of people died trying to get you out of here. What do you have to say about that?" I'd like to thank all the little people for their sacrifices. It's that commentary on like, you know, he realizes at this point this guy does not give a shit about the little people who literally gave their lives to save him. And you see it in that moment when he bails out of the Air Force One. He's like, "Godspeed, gentlemen. You know, I hope you all do well." Like, great, I'm in the pod. And,
I'm in the pod.
and-
I'm good.
Bye-bye. See ya.
I think the most dated things here are the tech. Obviously, I mean, basically the Snake and the president are both wearing Apple Watches. Basically, what you'd have at this point, like, oh, it tracks his heartbeat and location and everything, but it's this giant thing on his wrist. Like, no, that was not what it would be. Not today. No, that's not how we see it today. Yeah, apart from like dated graphics and thoughts on like what technology would have been like in the future, I still think that the rest of this movie hits pretty hard as far as its commentary on like what prisons, how we treat prisoners, how we treat. We're not trying to. There are obviously different cultures on this island. I mean, there's much like the Warriors, which people have brought up before. There are different. Like, we're not going to take Broadway. Don't take Broadway. It's a whole. There's like some group. We don't even get into it. I honestly love that Carpenter doesn't try to explain a lot of like what happens in the prison, because you get bogged down really easily. And like the pacing issues, if you're just like trying to explain all the things that happen here, like I think where the pacing kind of falls is the fight, like the ring in the ring.
Yeah,
that's where things for me kind of fall apart. When he's fighting the big dude, like I thought that could have just gone really, really fast, because honestly, like Snake, I'm sure Snake's fought a big dude before, even though he's got had taken a crossbow bolt to the knee. Just take out that guy's knee.
We I had the same questions. Like, the guy is like a 2-time Purple Heart winner. He's like a special forces guy, and he can't handle some big fat guy who's moving slow,
who's swinging a club around.
Yeah.
who's swinging a club slowly at him.
He was wearing his tactical lycra pants, and that may have slowed him down a little bit, the fashion. And also, we'll say one thing: this movie, I think, starts the first time you get this kind of like repeated line. Like, everybody, I thought you were dead.
Yeah. Yep.
And if you played "I thought you were dead" drinking game, you would be dead by the end of this film, because everybody says it. But it's funny.
Everybody who says it
funny,
dies.
Right. Pretty much everybody who says it ends up dead at the end of the movie.
Yep, exactly. I think there's a lot of inside kind of, like, to your point about social commentary based on the society at that time. I think that it makes it a good timepiece film for sure. But it is interesting. I think you're right. The science part of the movie, it doesn't hold up. Like the technology, it's because they use technology from way back then. It just doesn't hold up well.
Commodore 64.
Yeah. I think when you compare
42 years.
Yeah. I think, where if you're watching it now with these new eyes, right? And you compare this movie to, say, Mad Max, the new Mad Max that came out with
Fury Road?
with Charlize Theron and Tom
Hardy.
yeah, like, which I thought was way better because it was just pedal to the metal. I think that's where the gap is when you rewatch it in today's eyes, I think.
Yeah, I think it needs to be. It suffers from a pacing
Yeah, it was
problem.
slow.
Yeah,
But that overall, though, I think that I think that a lot of those issues, American imperialism is still a problem, as well as like the woman who like gives them the speech at the, like when they take
she's on the plane.
course one. She's like, it's the workers' party.
Yeah.
They're all trying to get stuff for like the workers and socialized. They're socialists. Which is interesting because they are also at war with the communist.
with the
Russia.
comment. Well, socialism's different than communism, Casey.
It is.
It's
I
so
agree.
different.
I agree, and I can separate those two, and I think that John Carpenter probably did too. From like watching interviews with him, I think that those are two different things. But there was also, I don't know if anybody else has seen the Jim. Maybe you've seen it. There was originally a scene shot when Snake Plissken gets captured after the robbery, and it's boring. Like, honestly, like watching it, I'm glad that John Carpenter cut this, because it's like them getting on a train, and it's like the one piece of science fiction is that there are these high speed trains that like traverse the whole country, like they where they were getting on in like Cleveland, and then they're like going to like next stop is Chicago, and like they're there in like a few minutes. But it's pretty boring and dull. And honestly, I thought that the first time we see Snake is like he's being brought in like off the bus, and then they like walked through the facility. I honestly, if I were going back and just like cutting this for pacing and like to make it go a little faster, I would have cut like the first time you see Snake Plissken is when they just bring him in to Lee Van Cleef's office.
Yeah.
That's the first time.
Yeah.
That should be the first time you see it, because he's just this character of mystery, and who is this guy?
Yeah.
And his like whole like, the name's Plissken, or you can call me Snake, is just like the perfect response to all these people saying like, I thought you were dead.
Yeah.
Like he doesn't let anybody in.
No.
Like you can see the moments when he has feelings like about Cabby dying and Brain dying and all of those things. Like he feels bad, but he's a tough guy.
He's got
like,
a job to do, and he's got to get shit out of his system. Otherwise, he's going to
gotta
die.
get X-rayed. He's got to get his neck's X-rayed.
Yep.
Which also, here's a little point that I picked up on that I had never noticed before. The doctor's name is Cronenberg.
Oh.
And the guy who is like the Duke's #1 guy, who looks like he just walked out of a production of Midsummer Night's Dream.
Yes.
His name Romero.
No way. That's so awesome. Yeah. So he's giving props to his equals, maybe?
Horror buddies.
Yeah, maybe.
Like, I think people he considers as like horror
equals,
director.
Who are,
equals.
ultimately both better directors than he is. But that's okay.
He directed like 12 movies in his career, so.
Well, I'm biased.
Obviously a Mondo for me. Like, I just love this movie because I think that it does influence it. I think what you said about like post-apocalyptic, this really was like, this is not post-apocalyptic. It's dystopian.
Yeah,
for sure.
If you lived in New York, it's post-apocalyptic though.
Get some like cheap real estate. I think that it influenced a lot of movies.
Yeah,
I think it has a wider influence than maybe it's actual like the content of it. And again, I think that like everything outside of like the effects shots, this feels like you're really there, and it's like really taking place in this world. It does not feel like it's being shot on a set. It doesn't feel like it's that's the scene at the end when they're driving across the bridge.
Oh, the bridge was real. It was in St. Louis though. But he actually bought the bridge just so he could blow shit up.
He bought it?
Yeah, he bought it for like $1 apparently.
I'm guessing it was probably out of like commission.
Yeah, it was out of service already, probably. Yeah. Yeah, no, it says he bought it from the city for like $1, then he gave it back to him when he was done.
Wow.
But yeah, the bridge scene was in St. Louis, but everything else was like Liberty Island in New York. But yeah, that's the best type of filmmaking.
Yeah.
Just blow shit up in the real set.
You know what? I think it's one of those movies. This movie is one that if you grew up with it, you're going to have a little bit more heart towards it. And if you didn't, people are going to watch it and think that the newer versions of that are going to be better, is what I would probably say.
Right. The more updated. This is a film which, I would not reboot just because even if you got Wyatt Russell, to play Snake Plissken, you can't remake this. It's one of those ones where you don't touch certain things. And this is one of you don't let somebody else play Snake Plissken. I don't know. I've seen a lot of people saying oh, they should remake it with Wyatt. I personally don't agree with that, but I think that the sort of updated graphics and other things would certainly help it. But I think that for me, most of what I get out of this is the messages of it, as opposed to the
reading through the cheese wire line.
Yeah,
exactly.
It's just
any closing comments
from me? Yep. I think that, again, like I said, I think this is probably the weaker of the collaborations between Kurt Russell and John Carpenter, but I think it sets the table for the future collaborations, which I think it just keeps getting stronger and stronger as we go along.
Well, everyone who's listening to us, if you believe this also, you're going to get more Casey in the future. We're not going to say when, but we are going to do this as a trilogy. So, Casey, tell our listeners where they can find you and what they can expect is coming up for the Nerdy Photographer in the future.
You can find the Nerdy Photographer podcast wherever you get your podcasts, any platform that you listen on. Most likely you will find the Nerdy Photographer podcast there. You can also find the Nerdy Photographer on social media. We're on Threads, we're on X, formerly known as Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok at the Nerdy Photo. And the Nerdy Photographer podcast is we just went over 100 episodes recently, and I've got a whole slew of new interviews coming up. We've got interviews with people who put out new photo books, some really interesting topics coming up that are not just based on photography itself, but also mental health and other topics of note, as well as just fun stuff. There's a lot of fun. I'm relaxing in my old age and just allowing myself to have a little bit more fun.
Well, if the people that are listening will know what we already know, how much fun Casey is, then make sure you listen to the Nerdy Photographer, because it is awesome. Well, thanks, Casey, for joining us on this special
Thanks for having me on.
Patreon episode. Please find the Nerdy Photographer everywhere you find your podcast. Thanks again to our patrons. We cannot do this without your help. And we're happy to let you know that you can feel the rage whenever you need to. But you can find us on social media at FilmRageYYC, or you can send us emails to filmragecalgary@gmail.com. Dare us to see terrible movies to fuel our rage, but no matter what you do, please, please, please make us rage. That's it for this special episode. Rage on.
Rage on.
Yeah, rage on.
Rage.